We have two awesome presenters today. We have Carrie Wiser, Senior Instructional Designer at the Game Agency, a division of ELB Learning, and Jake Kwiatkowski, Game Expert at the Game Agency. So without further ado, I'm going to let them show you some awesome stuff about games.
Thanks, Stephanie. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. Okay, you should be seeing the ELB Learning logo. If you are not, give me a holler. But today we're going to talk about how to space out games for training. So as Stephanie mentioned, I'm Carrie Wiser, and I am a learning experience designer with the Game Agency, Instructional Designer, however you want to call it. I've been working in course and curriculum design for about 25 years. That's where I started. And lately, I've been working more with learning games and game-based learning. What I'm finding is that learning games and game-based learning really give us some great ideas for supporting course design. So hopefully today I'm going to give you some inspiration that might refresh your thinking for the next time that you have to design a training event. So before we get started, I just wanted to take a minute to have you think about the last time you learned something new. You can feel free to put it in the chat if you would like to share. Obviously, the webinar is one example. This might be something new that you're learning. You might have been learning a sport. You might be learning, I'm trying to learn to make pie, which sometimes is a horrific fail and sometimes works really well. But the question that I would have for you about learning this new thing is, did you learn it all in one session, or did you have to return to it multiple times in practice? And I think that often the challenge as learning designers that we're asked to develop a one-time training session. But for so many of these skills, there's a combination of rules to follow and things to do, and it really takes us more than just one learning session to learn it. We need spaced practice because that provides the support that we and our brains need in order to learn and remember new things. So what we're going to talk about today is how to support space practice, specifically using games, how to choose an effective game or gamification strategy that can support space practice, and then also tips for using games and gamification before, during, and after training sessions. So we're actually going to start with a game. I'm assuming that everybody here is coming in with different levels of familiarity with space learning. So rather than just have me talk at you about what space learning is and maybe go over things you already know, we're going to have some fun with it and play a game. And Jake is going to lead the game for us.
Great. Yeah, thank you, Carrie. Hello, everyone. Jake here. And as Carrie said, let's play a game. That's why we're here, right? So we are going to play a quick trivia game. So right now in the chat, I am throwing in a URL. So go ahead, and if you want to click on that URL or copy and paste it into a web browser. And on one side of your screen, you'll have the Zoom call with me and Carrie, so you can hear us and we can talk to each other. And then on the other side of your screen, you can play the trivia game. I've got one person signed in so far. I love it. SJI, whoever you are, nice. All we are asking for here is your name or your username, right? Or, whatever name you throw in at the arcade when you're trying to get that Mario high score as a kid. Yes, here we are. Now everyone's coming in. I got 13 folks registered, up to 16. I love it. I'm going to give another 30 seconds for everyone to click on that link and register for this game, just in the interest of time, so we can move along here. Okay, great. We're up to 32. So the way this is going to work is we're going to play through this game together, and you will be answering the trivia questions on the separate window that you have open. Do not put your answers in the chat. Everyone will see them. If you want to put yes, you got it. My fault, Krista. There you go. If you want to put your answers in the chat, I'm not telling you how to play the game, but everyone else can see those answers. Maybe you want to throw people off. I've never seen it work correct or work well, but maybe today's that day. All right, I got 45 people logged into the game. Also, you can join the game late, all right? But we're going to kick this off. So here we go. Let's start this game in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Here is your first question. What Ebbinghaus model is focused on memory loss over time? Now I'm going to show you the answers, and you can pick one of them on that second screen. Your possible answers are, is it explicit memory, situated cognition theory, the forgetting curve, or modality effect? Yes. Now I can see the answers rolling in live time, and Most of you are getting this one correct. We've got some folks getting it wrong. Some folks still haven't answered yet. See that little orange bar that's slowly ticking away? That is your time limit. Now it's red. Make sure we get those answers in. Oh, wow, this ended up being almost split down the middle. So 32 of you knew that the correct answer was forgetting curve, and 26 got it wrong. Sorry. So the answer is the forgetting curve. Now, let's take a second real quick and look at that and talk about that. So we are all susceptible to the forgetting curve. The second you learn something, you start to forget it. So that's why we need to space out these training sessions. Practice makes perfect, all that good stuff. Yep, Christine, I know we all forgot that the forgetting curve is the right answer. It happens to the best of us. Next time, we got a lot of trivia questions left. So here we go. Well, we got 7 left. So here's your next question. How can we remember more of what we learn? Now, this is a multi-select answer, so there are multiple correct answers here. Make sure you pick all of them. Is it active repetition, one long session, multiple short sessions, or limited breaks? Yes. So we're split down the middle again. I love this. I love seeing this stuff coming in real time. About half your time is ticked away. Make sure you get those answers in. And remember, there is more than one correct answer. Alrighty, we are almost out of time. The correct answers were indeed active repetition and multiple short sessions. Yes, that's how we remember more. Next question. How many repeat sessions are most effective? How many? Here's your possible answers. Is it 2, 3, 5, or 7? You got a 25% shot here. Well, you got a 25% shot in all of them, you know. Oh, Albert's going the route of answering in the chat. Albert, do not throw any answers in the chat. Go ahead and you can sign in here on this screen. Again, maybe you're just trying to throw people off. And if that's the case, I'm sorry for stepping on your toes. We've got a couple more seconds left here. Exactly. Couple seconds left. We got another split answer. 33 of you guessed correctly that the answer is 3. While 27 of you got it incorrect. So we're pretty split down the middle there. All right, here's another quick feedback. So spacing out sessions over days, weeks, or months, etc., is the best way and the best time between sessions. It also does vary on what you're trying to do, right? If you're exercising, doing legs every single day, you're just going to hurt yourself. You got to space things out, exercise different parts at different times. All right, next question. Which training method supports active learning and practice? Which method? Is it slide presentations, show me animations, learning games, or explainer videos? Yes, that's what I like to see. That's what I like to see. Only one person got this one wrong, and your secret is safe with me. Wow. Okay, still only one person got this wrong. 60 of you so far have gotten this right. Few people were waiting for. The correct answer, my friends, is indeed learning games. That is the best way. Games engage you. You get active with your learning. That's the best way to go about it. All right, next question. This is a poll, so there's no right answer. You just have to give us your answer. Do you use games for training? Yes, very often, to some extent. Only a little bit, or no, not at all. All righty. So then once you've answered, you should be able to see the poll results, give you an idea of where everybody is using games for their training. I'm seeing a huge mix of answers here. Wow, we are all over the board with how many people use it. And we will see these poll results right now. There you go. 39% of you said to some extent. To the 14% of you, yep, I got you, Tony. For the 14% of you who said no, not at all, you are in the right place. We are here to talk about learning games for your training purposes. All righty, next question. What are examples of gamification? This is another multi-select, so make sure you select all the correct answers. Is it team challenges, missions, achievements, or leaderboards? Daryl, maybe if you're just joining us, Click on that link. There you go. Thank you, Stephanie. I appreciate it. All right, a couple of seconds left. A lot of you are getting this right. Select all of the correct answers. What are examples of gamification? We are split right down the middle. So most of you have figured out at this point that they're all examples of gamification. Team challenges, missions, achievements, and leaderboards. It's all gamification, and they're all great ways that you can engage your learners. So gamification is the use of game design metaphors to create more game-like and engaging experiences. Using everything that we talked about, having that friendly competition, giving achievements for your learners to achieve, to aim for, and having those leaderboards to see where they stack against their folks, just like you're going to see at the end of this game where you ended up. All ways to motivate your learners. All right, fill in the blank here. Rewards are typically used to boost what? Is it passive learning, intrinsic motivation, training budgets, or extrinsic motivation? Yes, we've got those answers flowing in quickly. About half and half on this one again. Second to last answer here, or question rather. Got maybe 10 more seconds before we run out of time. All righty. Most everyone has answered, and the correct answer is indeed extrinsic motivation. Rewards help you from an intrinsic value. And again, rewards, leaderboards, badges, those are all kind of gamification elements that we can harness. All right, the last question of our first trivia game here is another poll. What is the biggest challenge for using games and gamification in your training programs? Is it cost, the time it takes, stakeholder buy-in, or you don't know where to start? Again, no wrong answer. Just tell us what is holding you back if you are not using gamifications in your training program. All right, need a couple more people to answer real quick. Almost everyone has answered. Thank you. All righty, here are the results of the poll. Oh, look at that. Wow, pretty spread across the board. Time and schedule, stakeholder buy-in, those seem to be, they're tied. Look at that. Cost, always a factor in everything. And I like how people not sure how to start. That's the lower number. Cool. You start by attending a webinar like this to learn about games, right? All righty. That, my friends, is our trivia game. So I hope you had some fun. Started off with some nice fun energy here. And now we're going to kick back to Carrie to talk about spacing out these games more in our learning. And more games to come a little bit later. So Carrie, back to you.
Thanks. Okay, so we're going to go back to this slide presentation. What I did here is I just summarized some of the key points that we covered in the trivia game. There are just these few things to keep in mind with a spaced learning approach. You want to design several short sessions with breaks. You want to establish context and relevance. We had a question about the forgetting curve. One of the things about the forgetting curve is that when Ebbinghaus was trying to memorize things, it was all nonsense syllables. So it was super hard for him to remember. But if we can add some context and relevance, those are the kinds of things that make learning more meaningful to us and make it easier for us to remember what we're going to learn. Keep it short. If anybody's done anything with microlearning, this is a very familiar refrain. We need to keep the learning short in memorable pieces to make it easier to remember. You want to use a variety of instructional strategies. If you are interested in a little bit more about that, you can look into Mayer, M-A-Y-E-R, and his multimedia learning theory. The idea is that rather than focusing on learning styles, we want to focus on the fact that we learn from a variety of different modalities. So something that you learn just in audio isn't as effective as something that you might learn in audio and text is a very basic one, but we can expand that to include a presentation alone isn't as effective as maybe a presentation and a game or a scenario. So mixing up those things in variety can be very helpful for a spaced learning session. And also repeating concepts. That's really the core of the spaced learning approach. Most people say that you need to repeat the concepts about 3 times in order to make it stick. And speaking of make it stick, I really love book recommendations. So I added a couple just to this screen in case you want to learn more about spaced learning and some of the cognitive science behind it. If you are having trouble getting some stakeholder buy-in, this is a nice way to create like a through line to why it works. But Peter Brown and Make It Stick is a great book. Benedict Carey, How We Learn. And then there's also an article here that you might want to do a Google search for that specifically talks about the benefits and approach of spaced learning. I think you're going to get the slide deck at the end of this, so there's a link in there for that as well. So this is all well and good. You know, it's great that 3 times I've got to look at this stuff and then I'll remember it, but you're already probably struggling to get people to come to training 1 time. Like, I am sure that only about half the people that signed up for this webinar even showed up. So how do you get people to come back, and come back not just once, but twice and 3 times? And that is where games can help. So they can help during your training by keeping everybody kind of deeply engaged in learning. But they can also help after training, because you can have quick repetitions that reinforce and transfer the information into long-term memory. And then kind of the hidden opportunity is the before. Like, very often we're struggling to meet a deadline and just get that training out the door. But if you can think of a way to increase some engagement with the content before the training, almost like a teaser trailer, they're not necessarily going to remember everything that they learn in that game before the session. But if you can have them remember a few key concepts, then it's going to make their transition into the training more smooth, and it will also build some relevance and some meaningfulness in that will help make the actual training itself more memorable. And games really do support active repeat engagement. We all know that they're fun, so we would kind of think that maybe they do. But we did a sample study of 2,500 games on the training arcade, and 57% of players played 3 or more times. And the average was more than 1 play per session. And the players who did play saw a 58% improvement in knowledge between the first and third attempt at play. So it's not only kind of an interesting idea to include games, but it's actually a proven way to make it work. So now that you know that games are a good way to kind of add to your spaced learning strategy, let's talk about how to choose which games to use. So this is just a quick overview of some different types of games. It's really not a comprehensive list of games. Sometimes games fit in more than one category, but I found that these are some of the easiest games to templatize for training. Quiz games are probably what you're most familiar with. It's like the trivia game we just played. You can use them as a replacement for a quiz or a knowledge check, but you don't have to just think of them like a test. You can also use them to introduce content like we just did. You might use it as a summary instead of a summary slide, have them kind of actively engage with your summary that way. They work for both solo and group play too. So it's a nice way to add variety for both, not just the modality that you're teaching in, but also the way that people interact with each other within the session. Puzzle games I've found are a little harder to define. I usually think of examples. Wheel of Fortune is one really good example of a puzzle game. And in that game, which is basically like Hangman, you're basically trying to fill in letters one at a time to find a solution. Wordle is probably another one like that. I gave up on the Wordle yesterday. I don't know if anybody else did. But the idea here is that you put the pieces together and you fill in the blanks to answer questions to solve problems. Although these tend to be really good for testing terms and definitions, you can also use them to introduce concepts or even level set prerequisite knowledge, so that if you're starting, you can get everybody kind of at the same baseline before they come in, because they are fun and they drive engagement and they drive repeat play. And then story games, if you've built scenarios or written scenarios before, that's a really good example of a story game. They can be linear paths or branching paths. So either you go step by step through a process, or you can have a branching path. It can be a very simple branching path where if you make a wrong choice, you branch off in one direction and then quickly come back to the main path, or you can drive really complicated branches that go off in all sorts of different directions. They show the results of your choices rather than a quiz game that kind of just judges your choices. So they're a great way to establish context, a great way to establish relevance. They require a little bit more effort because you're going to need some more input from subject matter experts to write the story and the feedback and make it realistic and relevant. But if you take the time to write a good story and write good branches off of that story, it can really drive replay because people want to come back and see where those other choices might have taken them. And most of the time when I design story games, I am actually do a lot of research on my own about kind of what is the right path, talking to the SMEs, of course, too, but a lot of my time with the SMEs is dedicated to what are the common pitfalls, what are the common misconceptions, because those are the kinds of things that can make the experience a lot more memorable and effective. And it can also give you a lot of insight into what you can teach people to help them be more effective on the job. Okay, so when you're trying to choose what game to use, it's kind of similar to any other instructional design strategy. You want to know your audience, you want to support your learning objectives, and then in this case, because we're talking about space learning, you really want to encourage frequent play. So starting with knowing your audience, these first 3 questions that I've listed on the slide, I think they're pretty common. Most instructional learning designers would say that these are 3 very important questions for knowing your audience. But the really cool thing about game design is that it really forces us to focus on what interests or motivates people and how people prefer to learn. So if you think of us designing a learning experience, we have those guardrails. We have to make sure that the learning outcomes are met, which doesn't mean it's not challenging to do that, but it does give us some structure. When you design a game, it's all about game feel. If that game isn't fun, nobody's going to play it. So when you're designing a learning game, you have this nice opportunity to balance the learning objectives that you're trying to teach along with the game and the feel of the game. So remember a few things. And first, that not everyone is not motivated by the same things. So some people might love to go through a scenario, but others might want to play Jeopardy. Some people love to see their score on a leaderboard, and others have no desire to see that. They just want to get their personal best over time. So when you are thinking about your audience, and as you learn more about them, you want to use a mixture of games, and you want to engage a bunch of different types of players. So if you find that certain games are more popular with certain people, that's great. You can lean into those and use them, but also make sure that you change it up once in a while, or else you're going to get bored. Like, as much fun as you like Wheel of Fortune, if somebody made you play that 10 days in a row, you probably wouldn't be so excited to see it the next time. So that's what you want to do. You just want to switch things up a little bit. You also want to reward people for motivated effort. So instead of just focusing on things like the high score, you want to look at things like improvement, frequency, who's trying a new game, who's trying something in a subject they haven't tried before. And those kinds of things can also help you choose the right game for your audience. So I don't know if anybody else has noticed this, but I feel like instructional designers really love triangles. We're kind of like Telly from Sesame Street. There are all these different classification systems, and they always seem to fit into a triangle, whether it's Bloom taxonomy or no feel do. I would even argue that Maslow's hierarchy of needs is kind of a triangle that we use because it can help us determine people's readiness to learn. So rather than just focus on one of these and tell you that for every level in Bloom's, this is a game that you can use, I'm going to take a more general approach and show you how you can choose some game-based strategies and what you kind of need to think about. So this is my triangle. It's really oversimplified, so I'm not trying to answer all the questions with this one slide. And the games that are inside this triangle are the game agency games. So these are games that we use that we have templatized, but if you are using games, you'll see, I'm sure that no matter what tools you are using, you can find games that would fit in these kind of same little buckets. But the most important thing when you are choosing a game is to focus on balancing the cognitive load. So as I mentioned before, when you're talking about a game, you're talking about the fun and the feel of the game. And then as a learning designer, we're talking about meeting our objectives and our goals. And when you are choosing a game, you have to make sure that wherever you're choosing has a nice balance between the attention that the game requires versus the attention that the outcome requires. So for example, if you are looking at the games at the bottom, this is where the game mechanic is really fun and engaging. So you're trying to jump from level to level. When you're doing Wheel of Fortune, you're trying to decide if you should spin or solve or choose a letter. Those kinds of things take up some cognitive space. So your questions on those kinds of games can't be super complicated or you're going to lose people. The other day, for example, I went in and asked my son a question. My son was playing Destiny at the time. I thought it was a quick, simple yes or no question that he could answer very quickly. I did not get an answer until it was time for him to respawn because there was no way he could process that at the same time as play the game. So even though these games are designed with breaks so that we're able to kind of ask questions in between breaks in the action, we still have that issue of switching back and forth. So that's why these games at the bottom that have a more engaging and interactive game mechanic are probably better for your simpler and easier questions. In contrast, the games near the top that require a little more learning attention need to have a simpler game mechanic. So at the very very top at the game agency, there's a game that we have called Detective, which is basically you have a case and then you need to kind of judge the evidence in order to solve the case. I had a client recently who used that game to talk about what medication you needed to prescribe based on a patient profile. So these are kind of higher level order thinking skills that you want to address in a game. However, the game mechanic is really simple. All you have to do is make one choice at a time. So the game itself doesn't require as much cognitive space. It's really the content that requires more cognitive space. So when you are thinking about using games, that's what you want to balance. You want to balance the kind of content, the kind of outcomes that you're trying to achieve, along with the kind of interaction and attention that's required by the game. And you want to strike a balance that helps the learner really engage with your content without being overwhelmed. The only other thing I wanted to mention here for custom games is it's kind of out of the scope of what we're talking about today, but they do exist and you can have them to address specific needs and requirements. I think we all know that they can take a little bit more time to build. That's why the templatized games are so great for space learning because they encourage the repeat play. You can build a jump game with content very, very quickly, as opposed to a custom game that can take months on end to build. But the one nice thing is that you can look at some of these custom games just for ideas that not only would apply to maybe your choice of games, but also to your overall design approach. So just be aware that those kinds of games exist. They are something that could be supported in space learning, but I think today we're talking more about like the quick little games that you can insert into a pre-existing training program. And then the last thing, there was a trivia question about gamification and different kinds of gamification. I think the really important thing about when working with gamification, like we mentioned earlier, is knowing your audience. That there are some people who really are driven by things like competition, and there are some people who would rather just not do that at all. So you need to make sure that whenever you are using gamification, that you are using it in an appropriate and skillful way, and that you level set your expectations. So gamification is probably going to motivate certain segments of your audience to get really, really, really involved. And it's not going to work as well with others, but maybe those other people are going to be more motivated by, not to stereotype, but by playing like a scenarios game, right? So that's why it's really important. All of these gamification things, because it's so based in feel, it's so based in motivating us and providing extrinsic motivation to engage us and get us to move forward. It is a little bit more individualized, and you need to be aware of that. And again, that's why those short templatized learning games are really great, because they don't take as much time to build. And whether you're doing that in the training arcade or any other tool, the more you can reuse them and maybe just alter the questions a bit, the more you can get people engaged and having a good time, and then repeating your content. All right, so some quick tips for using games. When we're talking about using games for space practice, we're talking about before the training, setting the mindset. Here, you really want them to be focused on discovery and not their score. This isn't the time to be getting everything right. Right? It's the time to get introduced to things. It's the time to understand why they're here. So again, don't use it as something that you're going to track their score and reward them. You can reward effort, but don't the high performer, high achiever. Well, if they already know everything, why are they here, right? So let's make sure that we set the expectation that they're here to learn and get set for learning. During, you can use games to introduce, to summarize, repeat, to add variety to your approach. I think most of us are used to this portion of the space learning approach because this is what we're asked to build all the time. And for us, it's also trying to find the opportunities to add some training interventions or some learning games before and after that main training event that we've been asked to build. And then again, after, we can use games to encourage frequent play and to gamify the experience. So games before training, you can use them to preview and set expectations, to lay a foundation for learning, to establish context and relevance. And again, you're asking people to come before they actually come to the training. So if these are too long, you're going to lose people. It's not the time to tell a 20-minute story about all the things they might do wrong on the job, right? You want to keep it kind of short and fun. We built a Wheel of Fortune game that kind of goes along with this that we can share with you after, that I use as an advanced organizer, which I love to use games this way. I love, this is very strange that I'm getting so excited about this, but I love advanced organizers. Like, I just think it's a great way to get people in the mindset to learn. So I like to use games that way. Instead of listing on a slide the 4 things we're going to learn, maybe you just go through a game and you talk through those main concepts, and then later on you follow up on those concepts. You could also use a scenario if you're teaching something that's more soft skills, like sales or another process. You could have a scenario that kind of either shows them how that training relates to some issues and some things that they do on the job, or how it can help them solve problems. And then if you, again, it's not about getting it right? It's about seeing some common mistakes, misconceptions, understanding that you're not the only person that might be struggling with some of those issues. And then you can follow up on in the training itself, you can refer back to that story, and you can keep reinforcing that meaningfulness and that relevance. Games during training, you've seen here, we played a trivia game just at the beginning. For me, we used it to like just level set everybody, make sure we were on the same page so that you didn't have to hear me define games and gamification, which you might have never heard before. You might have heard 18 times. But during a session, games support active learning because they give you the freedom to play and learn from your mistakes. And mistakes are memorable, so it helps us remember and retain that information. You can use games to add variety to both the presentation and the repetitions themselves. We were working on a project with a client where they were building a virtual instructor-led simulation, and the part of the simulation was knowing the requirements for something that people were supposed to build. So we went over the requirements quickly, but then later on, we built a recall game where they could look over the requirements and answer questions about it. So they got it first off just to kind of be introduced to things, and we let it marinate a little bit. And then we used the recall game to kind of really drive those points home, because those requirements were key to a lot of the decisions that they would be making later on in the simulation. When you could also use games to possibly ask a series of what would you do questions. So if you're talking about maybe some rules that people need to follow, instead of just telling them those rules one by one, you could either just ask a quick question or set up a quick story and just say, what would you do? And when learners are uncertain about what to do, it gives them an incentive to learn. They don't need to know everything up front, right? We're curious when we don't know the answer. So when you do that and ask those kinds of questions, you can pique their curiosity and interest, and then the feedback, or you can explain that rule after you've grabbed that interest. You can use them to add social interaction. The other thing I would mention here is showing examples and non-examples. Distractors for me are the hardest things to write. I always think I can write the questions in a second, and then the distractors will take me 4 more days. But that's really our opportunity to address misconceptions, and we can teach through the distractors that we choose to share. And you can also make sure that based on what people choose, you can provide feedback that kind of helps them understand why that answer is correct or incorrect. And then games can also provide a brain break. So there are some quick games, in our case, like Match or Jump, that you can have, 4 or 5 questions just between training modules that are kind of fun, a different way to interact with the information. And then games after training. So after a session, I think it's really hard to control who participates and when. So games and gamification are how you're going to get people to re-engage. Just a few things to remember when you're building training after a session. Again, the spaced learning repetitions don't have to be verbatim. So you can write the content in a slightly different way. You can address things in a different way through different problems. And a variety of instructional strategies makes it easier to remember. And anytime we do something new and different and novel, it's more likely to stick in our memory. You can repeat the same information in a different order and format. You can build new games that alter the content a little bit and present it in new ways. You can even just switch questions, or my nemesis, distractors, slightly for multiple reviews. So there are lots of different ways that you can kind of refresh that content without having to rewrite a whole new game. A lot of games can be completed in 5 minutes or less. And just like before, you're asking people to come outside of the main session. So you want to keep it quick and short, something they can complete within distractions, something that they can justify their time away from the workplace to do. And you want to support safe practice. We very often give people a lot of great ideas and training, and then they go back on the job, and either they don't remember how that specific problem is affected by what they learned, or they encounter a totally new problem. So supporting safe practice, we can give them the opportunity to engage with more real life questions and problems after the event so that they can make better choices and make better decisions in the workplace. And then finally, encourage frequent play and drive engagement with gamification. Go to here. Just as long as you remember that some personalities are going to be highly motivated by certain things and others are less so, you can use gamification in a variety of different things to motivate people. You might be able, we've had people who have, done go get a coffee with the boss as a reward. There are certain things you can do. There are team challenges. And even if you have people who might not consider themselves to be extroverts and who might not think that they want that social interaction, especially now, even though we are moving away from COVID, there are still a lot of people in office environments who are at home. Just any way that you can get to kind of encourage that kind of fun social interaction and be respectful of people's preferences and needs in those situations. And the last thing I wanted to talk about was just the fact that games offer a lot of analytics. So once you build that game, it's not just that you're done, right? You can look at the analytics, you can use it to gauge prerequisite knowledge. So if you play a game before a session, you can use it to gauge what they knew before they came in, and then alter your training a little bit to address some big gaps if everybody got one certain question wrong. You can also use it to gauge learned knowledge, whether you're comparing to what they knew before to what they knew after, or just by the questions that are answered correctly versus incorrectly. I like to flag difficult games and questions in the analytics. Mainly, there are a couple of different reasons. You might find that there's a question that you just wrote that was too hard. The first Wheel of Fortune game I built, way too hard, and the analytics showed that to me right away. So it teaches you how you can better design your games to better engage people and also to really meet them where they are at, which is really our goal. But then there are other things where you just might find that there's a question that's difficult because you didn't even cover it in the training. And then you need to go back and adjust your training to meet that, or set your expectations for what people will get out of the training. And then when you can see what games are playing and when, and how they like to interact and what they like to interact with, that gives you information that I feel, in my case, is often severely lacking because we very often design it and then we have to move on to the next thing, right? But the games keep gathering that data for us, and we could go back and we can look at what are people learning, what are people doing, what are people engaging with, what times of day do they engage, and this can really help us bit by bit become better designers because we start to learn not only who is in our organization and how they work, but also as a general rule some tendencies that you can see in the way that people engage with content. So with that, I'm going to throw it back to Jake to kind of do a summary of some of the things that we talked about through a Jeopardy game.
Thanks, Carrie. Couldn't have said it better. It's time for Jeopardy. Let's play a game again. So, just like last time in trivia, I've got a new URL that I threw into the chat box. Excuse me. So go ahead and click that. Same thing as before. Have Zoomland open on one side and have your Jeopardy game in any web browser open on the other. And we are also just asking for a name, initials, nickname, whatever you want to throw in there just for the user board, or excuse me, the leaderboard rather. Great, I've got 11 folks signed in already. We got about 80 on the call. That's up to 17, up to 33. Look at that, I love that when that doubles up. Great, thank you everybody. And the rules of the road. If you are familiar with Jeopardy, it plays just like Jeopardy. We are the only officially licensed Jeopardy game for training. This is the real IP. We work with Sony. We are very proud and love that relationship. And the game works like the TV show. You get points for answering correctly. You lose points for answering incorrectly. There is a daily double out there where you will slide across and set your wager. Everything in here is a multiple choice question, except I do believe there is a text input question where you will have to type in your answer onto the game. We'll cross that bridge when we get there. All right, I got 63 folks logged in. Remember, you can log into the game later if you want to, but without further ado, this is Jeopardy. Here we go. You should be seeing that beautiful Jeopardy stage fly across your screen. And here are today's categories. They are why space learning, choose your strategy, and gamify it. Now, in the interest of time again, I'm going to go ahead and pick these categories for us. And you know what? I like to start big. So why space learning for $600? Here we go. Here's your clue. When information is presented like this, it is easier to recall later. Now remember, answer in the game, not in the chat box. No answers in the chat box. Your possible answers are during one long session, in a variety of ways, early in the day, or without audio. Ooh, not a single wrong answer yet. Still not a single wrong answer yet. 10 folks have yet to answer. See those red dots at the bottom? Once those are gone, you are out of time. Alrighty, almost every single person knew that the correct answer here was in a variety of ways. Yes, a variety of instructional strategies stimulates neural connections and improve recall. Yes, again, if you're playing Wheel of Fortune every day for 10 days, you might not be as excited about it. Yep. I don't know if that's true with Jeopardy. I could play Jeopardy every day for the rest of my life and still be excited about it. That's just me. All right, back to the board here. Yes, Stephanie says it's true. Oh. So why space learning? We did that. Choose your strategy. Let's go a little easier here for $200. Choose your strategy. Ready to spin? Now, speak of the devil. Wheel of Fortune is this type of game. Carrie was talking about game types earlier. I hope you were paying attention. Possible answers are, is it a story-based, a quiz game, a puzzle game, or escape the room? Yes, a lot of folks are getting this right. Few more getting this one wrong than the first answer. Still overwhelming amount of you getting this right. 40 of you got it right. 20 of you got it wrong. Your secret's safe with me. Don't worry about it. Few people not risking those points. No shame, but you got to play to win. Running out of time. The correct answer is indeed, my friends, that's a puzzle game. You got it. Puzzle games are helpful for introducing and repeating key terms, facts, and concepts. We're priming up those concepts, as Carrie had said earlier. All right, back to the board. Let's go to the last one. We did 6 and 2. Now let's do gamify it for $400. Let's see what we got here. When considering your gamification strategy, this is a good rule to follow. What's that rule? Is it set limits on play, know your audience, competition motivates everyone, or longer games are more fun? Yes, Professor Kevin Riley got that in 1 second flat, and so did a couple other people. Well done, well done. Almost everyone's getting this one correct. This is a nice high scoring question here, or clue, excuse me. Few more seconds. The correct answer is indeed, as Carrie had a whole slide on it, know your audience. The audience is key. Get to know them and craft quick, fun experiences that motivate them and encourage frequent play while training at the same time. All right. One more clue here. What do we think in the chat real quick? Space learning, choose your strategy, or gamify it. Whoever gives me the category first, that's when we're going to gamify it, Tony. I like it. You are on it. Woof. Everyone wants to gamify. I like it. Let's go for 600. Go big or go home, right? Here we go. Gamify for 600. Use this to turn mistakes into learning opportunities. What could this be? Is it penalty, leaderboards, time limits, or feedback? Yes. Oh, yes. All those answers were quick to come in. Wow, look at this. Not a single incorrect answer yet. I love it. Either we need to make this game harder, Carrie, or they were just really paying attention in the webinar. I don't know. Either way, it's good stuff. All right. Every single one of you who answered got this correctly. The answer is indeed feedback. All right. Feedback is a key teaching moment, and it impacts the way your audience perceives their mistakes. Take the time to write it well. Yes, growth mindset, precisely. Use that and grow from it as opposed to being weighed down by it. All right, we're just playing for glory here today, but you know, I still want to see who's at the top of the leaderboard. Look at all those perfect scores so far. Everyone's got $1,800, but don't be too happy yet. I'm sorry to burst your bubble. We have a daily double out there, and Final Jeopardy can also be wagered. I've seen it all made or lost in the last question, so we got a lot left. Gamify it for $200. Let's finish that off. Leaderboards and achievements provide these types of rewards. Oh, I think we talked about this earlier too. Is it, or are they, what have you, extrinsic, independent, autonomous, or intrinsic? Yes, only one incorrect answer so far. Oh yes, everyone's getting this. Everyone knows that right answer. A couple folks still need to get those answers in. You got a few seconds left. Only 5 people getting this wrong. That's okay. The finger slipped when they were going to answer that. We all know that. The correct answer is indeed extrinsic. Yes. Leaderboards and achievements extrinsically motivate learners. Like that coffee with the boss. Could be motivating. Could not be motivating. Depends on the boss, right? Okay. All right. Let's finish off these $200 clues. Why space learning for $200? Repeated exposure to small pieces of learning minimizes this. What do we got here? Is it performance, effort, forgetting, or transfer? Woo, look at all of you answering in 2 seconds or less. I love it. Everyone knows this one. We haven't even gotten rid of half the time yet. Only a few folks getting this wrong. Almost everybody has answered. I want to push us along here. The correct answer is indeed forgetting. You didn't forget. I love it. You remembered. Repeated exposure to new information minimizes forgetting. It's like we've talked about this a lot in the last hour. Okay, let's do why space learning. Let's finish that off for $400. Here we go. Most studies have found this number of training sessions to be most effective. Now, in the trivia game, about half of you got this wrong. So let's see. That's right. Our favorite answer. Is it 7? Uh-oh, we're throwing you for a loop. You got to type in the correct answer. Joel, I like that. I like where your head's at there. Type in the correct answer. Only one of you is getting this wrong. And I will say you can type it out or you can throw in the numeral. We were merciful. We were merciful today. All right. Few people not answering, but I'm pretty sure all of you know that the correct answer is 7. I'm kidding. It's 3. It's 3 sessions. Repeating the same information are most effective. So make sure you play the Wheel of Fortune game based on this after the fact when we're done. All right, 2 more clues left. We still got that daily double out there. I love when this happens. Is it 400 or 600? No, I did it. It's the daily double. So, ladies and gentlemen, on your screen, you will see a little bar. A lot of you are figuring it out already. Go ahead and take that dot and slide it across. And then once you have your wager set, click submit. Just like the show, once you've locked in your wager, that's it. You can't go back on it. So make sure you wager correctly. The average wager right now is $1,866. A lot of folks betting big on this one. You got to do a true daily double to be an actual Jeopardy player, in my humble opinion. All right, few people. There we go. All right, we got almost all of our wagers in, so I'm going to hide that board. Here we go. You can use this story-based game to provide context and address misconceptions. Carrie mentioned this before. Here we go. Possible answers are trivia, scenarios, sort it, or scramble. Ooh, not a single as soon as I said it, 2 people got it wrong. Dang it, I'm sorry. I jinxed you. But 60 of you know that 62 of you know that the correct answer is, in fact, scenarios. Yes, this is our branching path game that we offer at the Training Arcade. It's a great way to provide context and address misconceptions and also do soft skills training at the same time. All right, it's the final clue of the Jeopardy round. For $600, choose your strategy. Here we go. This type of game is best for higher level objectives like analyzing and evaluating. Remember the pyramid? Remember that pyramid? Here we go. Possible answers are match, recall, trivia, or detective. Ooh, May, I will get you the leaderboard before we go to Final Jeopardy. Don't you worry. I clicked too soon. Likely excuse, Heather. Okay, I'm kidding. Once your answer is in, it is locked in, unfortunately, just like in real Jeopardy. Alrighty, 7 of you got that incorrect. 57 of you know that that game is detective. Yes, where you can look at different pieces of information and it can allow learners to hone their judgment, problem solving, and cognitive processing skills. Heather, I knew you knew it. Don't worry. You got it right in my book. 1,000 points that don't matter for you. All right. We are done with the Jeopardy round. Here is your leaderboard. Wow. It is anybody's game going into Final Jeopardy. So one last thing. Final Jeopardy. When we come down to a tie like this, where all of you have the same score, the game calculates who answered fastest overall. So you want to get the Final Jeopardy correct, but also make sure you get it correct the fastest, and that's going to be our winner. All right, here comes your Final Jeopardy category. Gamer terms. Ooh. Hope you were paying attention. Do that wager board one more time. Maybe you can phone a friend, you can phone Carrie's son, and he can talk to you about Destiny terms. You know, I'm more of a turn-based strategy guy myself. I don't like the first-person shooters, but anyway. All right, we got a lot of those. 68 folks. Matt, this one's for all the marbles. I like the way you think, buddy. Here we go. I'm hiding that wager board. Now, all of the clues in Jeopardy, if you're building your own game, can have a visual clue. We have it just for Final Jeopardy here to put you in the mood. And here we go. Here is your clue text. It's a reward for completing game-based challenges. Is it WP, NPC, XP, or DPS? Oh, we got gamers. We got gamers on the call, ladies and gentlemen. Albert got that in 1 second flat. They know the right answer. Definitely a little bit more of a spread here. Most of you are getting this right. I'm going to give it a few more seconds so we can see the correct answer to our Final Jeopardy clue. Almost out of time. Sun gave me the answer. Yep, see, there you go. You got to have that in your back pocket. The correct answer is indeed, my friends, XP, or experience points. Yes, improves a player's leaderboard standing, can drive replay to level up. You got to grind. You got to work the grind to get that XP up. All right. So now, ladies and gentlemen, we're going to go back to our leaderboard, and it's going to give 1 second, and it'll refresh. So give it a second before we get our winner. Hang on. Hang on. There we go. Who's JK? Who stole my initials? You are the top winner of the day. Congratulations, JK, followed by ALA and MJM. You are the proud top 3 winners of our Jeopardy game. Congratulations. You all did tremendously. Look at all those high scores at the end there. Thanks for gaming with me. And now we have some more questions to answer that you guys posed during our webinar. You were a great audience. Thank you. Carrie, back to you.
Yeah, I have the questions open here. Stephanie, and Jen, do you want me to run down a few of them? How much time do we have? Do we have like 5 minutes?
Yeah, we have about 5 or 6 minutes. So let's just see how many we can get through.
Okay. So I have the first one from Krista, who I know was asking in the chat. How do we build a plan within an L&D department to not overuse a game style when working with a large curated catalog of learning programs? This would help prevent disengagement with games when embraced at an organizational level. For some reason, when I read this, the first thing that pops into my mind is a spreadsheet. But the idea here is that you want to, first of all, start with a series of games and know that you can build those games over time. So whether you're using the games in the training arcade or whether you're using games that you build in Storyline or Lectora or anything like that, you want to take a templatized approach, because the more that you can reuse those game mechanics with different content, the more variety you can add. And I know you're asking about not overusing them, but if you have more of a variety of things that you can build quickly, you're less likely to overuse certain ones. And then I guess the other thing would just be, like I said, some sort of spreadsheet or something. It sounds so simple, and it might, it might sound silly, but really I would do that. I would track when I'm using games, who I'm using them with, and just make that kind of tracking process part of my overall design process. So when I very often think of my instructional strategies, not to be one religion or another, but like hanging ornaments on a Christmas tree. And you want to just make sure that you're not designing your instructional design like your kids built your or decorated your tree and put all the ornaments around the bottom, right? You need to actually take a little bit of time there to figure out how you're going to spread it out. And the more templates you can have, the better opportunity you're going to have to use some different varieties. What if people don't participate in games? Again, I think it's knowing your audience, knowing what kind of people that you have. Depending on the kind of things that you're teaching and the kind of people that you have, they're going to be more attracted to different kinds of games. And you have to remember, something like scenarios is a game, but doesn't always feel like a game. It might feel more like a story. It might feel more like something else. So understanding those kinds of preferences and tailoring it to that, and also setting your expectations, right? Don't go into it assuming that you're going to have 100% participation, because you probably will be disappointed. But you want to make sure that especially if you're using games as repetitions, that's a way to kind of repeat the content, to get people engaging with the content, and to offer those opportunities to people to learn more, and know that you might have to offer some repetitions in some other ways as well. A mission, I know that was on that gamification slide. A mission would basically be setting goals to complete several games in a row, or one game in a row in a certain time frame, but it's basically adding some sort of external wrapper, external motivator around a game itself, so that instead of just go play this game, it might be go play this game and then this game and then this game. That's more of a journey. Or it might be that you want to complete a game within a certain time frame. Concept of creating distractors. How would we prepare other professionals to do this in an appropriate way, and that validity and distractors to ensure content has been acquired? That's awesome, because the distractors, I think, are really hard. And I think if you can provide some guardrails. I have learned to write better distractors from a game designer that I work with, because she started asking those questions about where do people screw up and what kinds of misconceptions do people have. And so even if you just have, when you have other professionals working with subject matter experts, or if you have subject matter experts yourself writing distractors, giving them a template that might ask some of those questions to kind of spur their memory and their thoughts into that kind of direction. I think anytime you can give them, just think of them as maybe thought prompts to just help them generate those ideas. It's okay to have some guardrails. You don't have to go in. I mean, I've been reading notes this whole time. I know this stuff, but I can't just pull it all out of my head. So you got to make sure that you have some sort of guardrails when you're talking to subject matter experts. And if for no other reason, because they can get really off track when they're really enthusiastic about what they're talking about. And so if you have those guardrails, it's a great way to bring them back and refocus on the information that you need from them. How do you recommend pushing out the games after training, LMS, intranet, or email? I think, having them centrally available on the LMS is a great idea. If your LMS or we have like a training arcade, if it has notifications that you can set, and then not only tell people that it's there, but then remind them that the games are there later. And I think it just depends on your culture. I don't know all the time. There are some places where the internet is like the focal point of all interaction, like that's where they go. So I think it goes back to knowing your audience and knowing how they respond. And again, if you send out an email and nobody plays the game, then email is probably not the best way to tell them that a game is there. But if you put a huge banner on your internet and all of a sudden 87 people come to play the game, then you know. So I think it's, we all want to know the answer up front. But sometimes, especially when you're trying something new with games, you need to try a few things and then kind of show that you're willing to adjust and change your strategy based on what people actually respond to, which is really kind of the whole level. That's the whole basis of game design thinking in a nutshell, right? Not just giving people things to learn, but trying to respond to how they react to the experience that you're giving them. Oh, main metrics do you analyze? Score, You can look at, what they scored well on versus what they didn't score as well on. You can look at how many games they completed. If you're getting a lot of people who are abandoning a game, it might be because the game is too long or too hard. You can look at when people play, because you might find that lots of people play at 4 o'clock on Friday, but nobody plays at 11 a.m. on Tuesday. So kind of those kinds of things. So you can track preferences. You can track what questions they're getting wrong, what questions they're getting right. And just remember, there's like no right answer. A question that everybody is getting wrong could be that the question is too hard. It could be that you never covered it in your training. It could be that the distractors don't make sense. So looking at the metrics is a great way to identify a trend, and then you can look at that in a little more depth and figure out. It's usually, I don't want to oversimplify, but it's usually pretty clear when you know that something isn't working. Once you look at it through that fresh perspective, you can very often figure out pretty quickly what it is that isn't working. So.
All right. That was great. You finished right on time, answered all the questions. Thank you so much, Carrie and Jake. We're getting tons of great feedback in the chat about how interesting this webinar was, how informative it was, and just fun in general. And thank you, everyone who joined us. I will take this moment to say, if you want to use those games that Carrie and Jake showed today in your own training, you can get a free trial from our website. And if you want to learn more about gamification, at the end of July 26th and 27th, we are having a virtual conference, ELBX Online. And Carl Kopp, who's a professor at Bloomsburg University and kind of a big deal in the gamification world, he will be speaking on the 26th at our conference. So I'm going to put a link to that in the chat. That's the website for the conference. You can find out some more information and register to join us for that. Thank you all so much for joining us today, and hopefully we'll see you on another webinar or at ELBX Online. Thanks, and have a great day.
Thanks, everybody. Be well. Take care.